Howdy, welcome back to Wobble Enjoy Sports. If you're new around here, hope I can get you to consider to like the content and subscribe to the channel. But if you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. Let's look at the Eastern Suburbs draw for 2025. And a quick stat about the first half of their campaign is that they feature on Friday Night Football 8 times inside the first 11 weeks of the competition. Well, I got to look for something else to do on a friggin' Friday night, fair dinkum. The Roosters pre-season challenge sees them take on the Dragons at Cogra, the Newcastle Knights up on the Central Coast, and the first game of their season, the regular season, is a game against the Brisbane Broncos on Thursday night footy at Allianz Stadium. It is the first Australian soil contest for 2025. That's an enormous way to start anybody's campaign. But then they're on the road in back-to-back weeks, and it's not going to be easy. They take on the reigning premiers, the Penrith Panthers, on Friday night footy. 1 week later, they cross the ditch to take on the New Zealand Warriors at Go Media Stadium. 1 week later, on a Friday, they take on the Gold Coast Titans, the 6 o'clock kickoff. And then round number 5, the greatest rivalry in all of rugby league, South Sydney versus the Sydney Roosters, emanating from Accor Stadium on Friday night footy. The strength of opposition is pretty large. The Warriors at home are a completely different beast. The Gold Coast Titans, with much respect to fans and players alike, you'd say that would be the one where you'd say the Roosters could pip it. But let's not forget, they're going to be without Sam Walker and Brandon Smith to start at least the first half of their campaign. So that already screams as a danger game to me, just quietly. And sometimes the Titans do give them a bit of curry, especially over the past 5 seasons. You also chuck in the Broncos, who's going to be a completely different beast with Michael Maguire at the helm. You've also got Penrith Panthers they're taking on, and then the old firm, the old rivals against South Sydney. That's a tough way to start 2025 for the Roosters. Part 2 for Sydney Roosters begins with a trip to Suncorp Stadium to take on the Brisbane Broncos, and then they have 3 straight home games, technically. Game number 1 in all of that, they take on the Penrith Panthers at Allianz Stadium. Anzac Day arrives in round number 8. Round number 9 is Magic Round, and this is where their third home game is zipped up to Suncorp Stadium for Magic Round on a Friday night against the Dolphins. They then have their first bye for 2025 in round number 10. It is a very tough start for the Sydney Roosters, who are dealing with not only the injuries that I've already talked about, but also the leadership loss of Jared Waerea-Hargreaves, the experience of Joey Manu, the young brilliance of Joseph Suaalii, and they're taking on the Brisbane Broncos, the Penrith Panthers, twice inside the first 7 weeks of the competition. This draw is looking extremely tough. Part 3 for the Roosters is where things will begin to heat up. The binoculars will be out for Sam Walker and or Brandon Smith to return from their ACL injuries, but in round number 11 they take on the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs at Accor Stadium, and that's halfway through the month of May, so it still may be a bit too early, but I think people will begin to start to talk about their returns. And then in round number 12, they have a game against the Cronulla Sharks at a venue that is yet to be determined, and I'm just guessing here, but I think it will be up at Gosford, Central Coast Stadium, Saturday, 7:30 p.m, and this game is going to be Origin affected. It is a part of split round, and that's unfortunate for the Roosters because they could be without James Tedesco and Angus Crichton and maybe a couple of other of their superstar players. In round number 13, a few days after Game 1 of State of Origin in Brisbane, they host the Canberra Raiders, Sunday twilight footy. I think there's enough time there where some of their Origin representatives can back up and play twice in the space of the same week. Round number 14, they have their second bye, and then round 15, they play again during a split round, and it's against the Newcastle Knights up in the Hunter Valley as well. So they're really hoping, everybody wearing a Roosters jersey will be hoping that Sam Walker and Brandon Smith will be back around this time, because considering the start to their year, which I think is the hardest start to anybody's campaign that I've seen so far, and then you add in the fact that already they're going to play twice during split round footy, it keeps getting tougher for the Roosters, man. To begin part 4 for 2025 for the Roosters, beginning in round 16, they technically have back-to-back home games with a bye, their third and final bye sandwiched in between. Round 16, they host the North Queensland Cowboys Sunday afternoon footy in what will be an Origin-affected game, because this contest takes place a few days after the State of Origin match emanating from Optus Stadium in Perth. So there won't be any Origin representatives in this game. You wouldn't think so anyway. Then their third bye, their third and final bye, comes in round number 17. Round number 18, they play split round rugby league again. They take on the West Tigers at Allianz Stadium Sunday afternoon footy. They play in all 3 split rounds for 2025. That is really unfair and really unlucky. They then take on the St. George Illawarra Dragons 1 week later after State of Origin Game 3 in Sydney. So again, if it's a decider, if it's a bruiser in game number 3 for State of Origin, you don't think that you'd be playing your players to play against the St. George Illawarra Dragons a few days after, and that's emanating from Cogra. So in part 4, yeah, there's a buy-in there. They have 2 home games, 1 away contest that remains in Sydney, but it's completely Origin affected. And mind you, James Tedesco may not be picked for Origin. Maybe he will. That is so unlucky for the Roosters. However, all that could be saved if Sam Walker and Brandon Smith return throughout that period, and they'll definitely be back for this last portion of their season. The race to the finals begins in round number 20 against the Cronulla Sharks, Friday night footy. 1 week later on Thursday night, they host the Melbourne Storm. Round 22 and round 23, they are on the road back-to-back weeks, and the first contest is against the Manly Sea Eagles, and then 1 week later, they're against the Dolphins up at Suncorp Stadium. They're back at home against the Bulldogs for Friday night footy. In round 25 and round 26, they again have back-to-back away games. One against the Parramatta Eels, Saturday night footy, and then there's a short-ish turnaround where they take on the Melbourne Storm for Friday night footy in round 26. And then obviously round 27, the final round of the regular season, is against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. And looking at the race to the finals, I'll reiterate, it's Sharks, Storm twice, Manly, Dolphins, and Para away, and the Bulldogs and South Sydney are knocking on their front door at home. My reaction to the Roosters draw for 2025 is that is the hardest draw that I've seen so far, and it's going to be really hard to beat. There is no slowing down. It is constantly intense for the Sydney Roosters, and I have repeated myself a few times here, but you've got to add in the fact, you've got to calculate that Sam Walker and Brandon Smith will not be back until at least round number 12, maybe against the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks, thereabouts, at the arse end of May. If they're not 6 wins after the first half of the campaign, 6 wins is still enough to keep your head sort of just above water, I would think. That's a 50% success rate, but that's as hard as it gets, in my opinion, man. That's a really unfair draw as well, considering they play all 3 split round games and then they're backing up. They have a game after the Origin as well, so there's no easy little break that the Cowboys and the Broncos have been afforded the Melbourne Storm as well, in their draws, the Roosters, they're backing up. They're playing through and then they're backing up, maybe without Origin representation. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how Trent Robinson uses his troops throughout 2025. That's the hardest draw for 2025. Thank you everybody for tuning in and watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you. Take care. Adios. #RidenHigh 2025.